Okay, so in about 1 week's time, we're going to have the 2025 RC10Talk Fall Brawl. That'll be the last vintage race of the year, for me at least, and I think for everybody. I don't think there are any vintage races coming up between now and December. I could be wrong about that, though. Um, so the next one that I would do after this would be in early spring if we do another Roostapalooza race and Insanity RC. That would be like a loamy, bumpy surface, basically before they pack the dirt down. For that race, I would have to bring a totally different set of buggies, quite possibly, because the surface is so different. But no matter, right now we're focused on the Fall Brawl, which is hard to pack dirt, colder weather, and the way the track layout is, it's the same exact layout we had for the spring shootout. So, you got this big jump near the start finish line, so you need a good suspension for that. And then coming around the backside, I don't know if any of the potholes that we had earlier in the year have been patched up, but that section tends to get blown out a bit. So, you need something with just a really good suspension. Even though the track layout looks simple, you need a good suspension. So there's that component. And then there's also the commitment that I've made to myself that I want to do more development of my low-C cars. So I'm going to try to use this Fall Brawl to do that. So I'm going to run all 5 classes, which is 4-wheel buggy, 2-wheel buggy, stadium truck, Y2K stadium truck, and Y2K buggy. So let's see. Let's start with the simpler things like Y2K buggy. We have the Kyosho RB Type R. I have 3 options really for Y2K buggy at the moment. It would be this, the Kyosho RB5, and the Losi Triple X CR. The RB5 I already ran at the Vintage Off-Road Nationals, and I love that buggy. It's really wonderful. But I already ran it, and I want to, try to get a good result with the RB Type R. I know it's in there somewhere because it's basically like a Kyosho RC10B3. Right? Geometrically, it's very similar. So I want to put a bit more time into that. And for the Losi Double XCR, I do have one, but I need to actually put electronics in it and get it ready. And I am also waiting on another one to come from a friend of mine who painted me a body with this scheme. So I'm really waiting on that one to come in, that I could set that one up to actually go racing with. It's just not here yet. So for now, RB Type R is the way to go for me. And last time I ran this at Insanity during the spring shootout, I had a dog bone pop out during the A main. So I only got 2 minutes of running during the A main. But the buggy felt okay. It needed a bit of work. I can't remember what I did to it since then because it's been a few months. But I'll spend some time developing this throughout the weekend. So it's just that. There's no other option for that right now for Y2K buggy. Stadium truck. I have options for stadium truck. I have my RC10T2, Kyosho Pro XRT, and my Losi XXT CR. The T2, I don't want to run it at Insanity at the moment because I don't want to scratch it up too much. I want to kind of save that for Vintage Nationals if I end up running it there again. The Pro XRT is a very good truck. I tried running it at the Vintage Nationals earlier, and it wasn't great there. That was partly my fault. I was mucking around with the rear suspension geometry, and I hadn't rebuilt the shocks in a while, and I was using the wrong tires. The truck was all over the place. And I have plenty of proper dirt tires for that truck, so I'm tempted to run that at Insanity RC so I can burn through those tires. But I also want to develop the Losi stuff, so I gotta kind of resist the temptation, put that truck aside as much as I like it, and just keep playing around with the Double XT. I ran this one at the Roostapalooza last year. I have 2 Double XTs. So this one I ran at the Roostapalooza. Needed some work on the suspension and needed a fair amount of work on the gearing and timing. So I went down a few teeth on the pinion for this because I think I was overloading the motor last time, if I remember correctly. So we'll see how this does. It This is a very easy truck to drive, so I do like that about it. I'm not worried about the handling. I just want to spend a bit more time on the gearing and timing for this truck, and then apply any findings I have from that to the other double XT. And then for Y2K Stadium truck, RC10T3. I also have a Kyosho RT6 that I'm interested in running, and it would technically qualify for Y2K Stadium truck. But I think the T3 is really more sort of, let's say, in the spirit of a vintage Y2K Stadium truck class. The RT6 is a bit newer, and maybe I'll run it at some point. But I think also the suspension setup on that is a little stiff, and I just been a little bit lazy lately to go in and fix it. So I'll run this. This did have some issues the last time I ran it. It was rolling a lot, I think in the rear especially. So it could have been a ride height issue. I'm not totally sure yet. I'll find out when I take it out again at the track. But it was still okay. So, no real serious issues there. I just got to work on the roll a little bit. Four-wheel drive buggy, Losi XX4 will be the front up option. Backup, as usual, will be the YZ10. That's always sort of lurking in the background. Double X4 is, I always bring it to Insanity, and then I never end up really running it. Like the last time I raced it was at the Roostapalooza. That was like, a bumpy, loose track, and I ran it for the first 2 rounds, and it just wasn't doing great on that surface. My shocks weren't set up very nicely for that. So then I went to the YZ10. And then at the spring shootout, I ran it during open practice, and then I committed to the Schumacher Cat 2000 EC, which ended up being a bad idea because that buggy, even though it was great during open practice, during the actual race, it was very hard to drive. So I want to commit to the Double X4 this time and just run that. I might even leave the YZ10 home just to force myself to commit to this buggy. And then with two-wheel drive buggy, we have these 3 options: the Losi Double XCR, the RC10 B2, and the Kyosho Pro X. You could say these are my 3 best two-wheel drive buggies, but really my Traxxas TRX3 would be right up here in that list. That's probably my best one so far, but I don't want to bring it to this track because I tend to bring that to the Vintage Nationals, and I want to spend more time developing these. So the Double XCR, I only ran this once during open practice at Insanity RC earlier in the spring, summer, for the spring shootout. And that was all over the place. The suspension setup was so bad on it. So I messed around with it a bit. It was really just thinking through what pistons and oil and springs and shock angles that I would need. I don't have track time with this car. So it's really just thinking through what would work better. So I have a new setup on this that I think will do better. We'll find out. And then if that fails me for some reason, then I don't want to go chase a setup on that. Then, I have the B2 and the Pro X. The B2, I haven't changed it since I test drove it at the Vintage Off-Road Nationals. The only thing I did was just take the Hydro Drive out and replace it with a conventional, V2 slipper clutch setup. Primarily because that will allow me to run a gear cover. When I have the Hydro Drive on this, I couldn't fit any gear cover on it. Even Hydro Drive gear covers were too small for this because of the way the Hydro Drive mounts, or the way that I mount it on this. It's further out and I can't fit a gear cover over it. So I just took it out, put a standard sort of slipper setup in there. So that's this. And then for the Pro X, I always come back to this buggy. So every time I bring it to the Vintage Nationals, I have trouble with it. But then every time I bring this to Insanity RC, for whatever reason, it seems to do okay on that track. So I'm going to bring it for that reason. And I did make a change that I want to experiment with. I'm thinking maybe that would explain why I have trouble with it on some tracks but not others. And it's ultimately, I think, related to the rear suspension geometry, perhaps. So what I did, and again, we're just going to have to test it out to see if it works. But basically, I drilled another hole to mount the rear camber link onto the rear hub carrier. From the factory, you have these two holes here, which, if you run the highest hole to give you the highest roll center, you have this shortest camber link, like a really short camber link. Even if you use the inside hole here on the bulkhead, that camber link ends up being really short, which means high camber gain. The lowest camber gain setting would be this guy here, but even from this hole here to the inside hole on the bulkhead, that camber link still ends up being shorter than what you would see on the B2 or the XX or the Traxxas TRX3. So I wanted to try to get it longer. So I drilled another hole down here, which does drop things a bit in terms of the position of the ball stud, but it does allow me to get a longer rear camber link. So I drilled that here, and then I dropped this ball stud down by one hole because it's a 3x4 matrix here on the bulkhead. And we're going to see how that does for handling. Hopefully that improves things. And then I also moved the shock down to the lower hole on the tower, and then I moved the bottom portion of the shock to the outer arm, so that way I don't have too much rear droop. Previously it was on the middle hole, and that gave me a lot of droop. But if you have too much droop, even though that's good over bumps, it can make the car really unstable on corner entry because it allows the rear to lift more and more weight to transfer forward, so it's going to rotate too much on corner entry. So you do want to limit droop a little bit there. So this right now feels like it will be very plush. So I'm actually kind of hopeful for this. But again, I want to try to make the XX work. But if that doesn't work so well, or if this works a lot better, I'll just go straight to this. So that's it. We have RB Type R, XXT, T3, XX4, and then one of these three, and then that's kind of it. Maybe I'll leave the YZ10 home. Yeah, so if you're going to this race next weekend, I hope to see you there. It should be a lot of fun. Hopefully it won't be too cold. And that's it for now. Thanks for watching.